A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone, depending on what part of the world you're tuning in from. The topic for today is tips and tricks about product management no course will teach you. My name is Vishal Anil, and I'm a PM at Microsoft. My presentation today, although targeted towards a technology PM, can come in handy for any PM. Also, some areas called out in this presentation may be responsibilities of a role some companies call as a technical program manager. These tips and tricks are a compilation of things I've learned over the years from my own experience and observing what other PMs around me do very well. This in no way is an exhaustive list, but it's meant to cover aspects of the job that will put you on the path to success. There are three high-level aspects we will cover, namely people, process, and technology. Let's start off with what I believe is the most important aspect of a PM job, the people. Now, when it comes to people, there are two themes we'll cover today, your team, including you, and your customer. Now, let's start with your team and focusing on you. The first most important tip is to be selfless. At the beginning of your product management career, one is selfish. I was guilty of that too early on in my own journey. But you soon learn that when you're working in big teams with fellow PMs, designers, engineers, business managers, your mentality must shift from what's in it for me to what's in it for the customer, what's in it for the product. You don't always get credit for your ideas or your guidance, and you shouldn't be looking for it either. But when you start practicing being selfless and supportive, you soon become the pillar of the team and a sounding board for all of your teammates. You get a lot of what I like to call good product karma, whose benefits can be reaped later. You will learn about people's thinking and working styles and how you can adopt some of them. They will come to your help and bring up scenarios and ideas you never thought of. All in all, it means there is a higher chance of the customer being successful with your product. The next is what I call be relentless and don't have an ego. This seems obvious, right? But some of you will, and most of you won't be surprised to reflect on how many people around you at your workspace have egos the size of mountains. When you're trying to get someone to do something for you or help you out with something, be relentless. Ping them again and again, but in a polite manner at spaced out intervals to ask about it. Remember that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to ask questions that you may think are dumb, but no question's a dumb question. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to leave your ego at the door, because when you do, others notice and you help foster a culture where people are willing to adopt a learn it all mindset as opposed to a know it all mindset. The third important tip is you have your engineering manager's back always. You and your engineering manager need to develop a symbiotic professional relationship, because seldom can one achieve anything that's interesting without the full backing of the other. This means you sometimes cover for them in meetings. You never point fingers or direct blame at them, and you help keep their team's morale up. So you play a primary role in a lot of those activities. The next one is identifying primary stakeholders and getting their buy-in first. A superpower every PM must develop is identifying those primary stakeholders within the team who can influence others. Once they're sold on your scenarios, your ideas, and why it's the right thing to invest in for customers and the success of the product, they will fight your battle for you to convince everyone else. As you build trust in the team, you become a primary stakeholder at some point on a lot of decisions. When you are entrusted and given that responsibility, think deeply and thoroughly before having a point of view on a particular matter. The next interesting tip is when it's your opinion versus my opinion, I always choose customer input and data. Now, every PM will encounter this in their career when they observe that decisions are being made based on opinions. And when you catch yourself or others saying, I think we should do this, or I feel that's the right way to achieve this, flag it directly or indirectly. You must steer those conversations towards customers want us to do this, and the data shows that we should be doing that. By talking directly with a diverse sample of customers carrying out surveys, or analyzing readily available market data. Now, the next tip is what I call having anchor customers. Have a bi-weekly or monthly pulse meeting with 2 to 3 anchor customers for your product or service. Run them through new features or capabilities that you're adding to the product. Ensure that these customers are radically different from one another in terms of size, line of business, and maybe primary region of operation. This will ensure that features and capabilities that you're envisioning don't cater to only the requirements of one type of customer. Although anchor customers are usually thought of as those you work with to define an MVP scope for the product, I'd highly recommend having a pulse with them even after the MVP is built and shipped. These customers will have historical context on how capabilities have evolved in your product and are the best sources of continuous feedback. Now that we've covered people, let's move on to process. And when it comes to process, there are 2 high-level themes that I want to cover. Namely, the first 1 to 3 months on a new team, what are some of the processes that I've followed and I've seen people around me follow, and some other tips and tricks. So the first 1 to 3 months, what I'd recommend is attending every stand-up and meeting you possibly can. I have followed this religiously in every new team I've joined. I go seek out all of the meetings and stand-up invites I can find out there from other PMs, engineering managers, leads, architects. In most of these meetings to begin with, you're likely going to be a fly on the wall, but listening to everything will help you learn. It'll help you piece things together. Make notes of things that you don't understand and ping the person who brought it up in the meeting. Make a note of all the acronyms you hear, and there'll be thousands of acronyms when you join a new team, and try and find out what each of them mean. The next point or tip that I want to cover is in the first 3 months on a new team, have one-on-ones with every single PM and engineer on the team. Learn what each one of them works on. Ask them to explain their component or piece of functionality they own and drive. Also try learning about what they're passionate about, both at work and outside. Be genuine in wanting to learn about them. And when you're not, it can be seen through very easily. So yeah, be genuine. The next thing is something that I actually learned from a former manager of mine, because once things pick up at work, the PM role is one of the most demanding ones in tech. You always have more things to do than you can fit into a day. So what I usually do is make a list of 4 things that I'll do today, along with their relative priority. If something else comes up today, it'll have to be looked at tomorrow, unless it's a real fire that needs to be put out, in which case you can bump out one of your 4 items to the next day for this one. The next one is retrospectives, planning, and encouraging team growth and team building. Another good practice that I would highly recommend following is creating an efficient process around monthly planning and sprint retrospectives with engineering teams. This has 2 benefits in that you can establish an efficient way to define what needs to be prioritized and built the following month with the engineering leads. And through retrospectives, you get to learn about strengths and areas of improvement for each engineering team that you work with, which can then be applied to other engineering teams you work with as well. Similarly, you can also set up scenario reviews with the entire PM team across the product to present each PM scenarios that's going to be worked on, so that folks chime in with their feedback and flag any potential dependencies they may have on that capability in their own feature area. The next one is quarterly compete analysis. Something every PM must do, in my opinion, is to keep a close track of 2 to 3 competitors in your product area and keep a pulse on the market for your product area as well. Do this on a quarterly basis. What this helps you do is stay ahead of the curve if your product is a market leader, or catch up with the market leader if it's not already. It's important to keep a pulse on the market for your product in general, as if it's a market that has a growth trajectory, then your career is also set up for growth. But if it's a product area whose market in general is declining, as there are other solutions out there to solve the overarching customer scenarios, then it's time you reflected on your career choices and the line of business you want to build a career in. So now that we have covered people and process, let's move on to our third aspect, which is technology. Now, for our third aspect, technology, I want to cover two themes. One is just getting into the details, and two, the user experience. So, the first most important tip for all of the tech PMs out there is to study architectures and engineering specs. There are different degrees of detail that a PM goes into, but from what I've observed, the most successful ones have all the details. To have an informed point of view on trade-offs, resource costing, validations, how easy or difficult it is to deliver on a customer scenario, it's extremely important to understand how the system is designed and architected. Go spec hunting and make the engineering architect your best friend. Learn as much about the system from them as possible. Understand how each component of the product works and understand all of the corresponding details as well. That way, you can see the bigger picture on how things can be stitched together to add customer value. The next step is learning about UX and UI design. In my opinion, the three key aspects of any product are functionality, experience, and cost or price point. I cannot emphasize enough on the importance of the experience aspects of a product. As PMs, we first think about solving a customer problem with a piece of functionality in the product, but something we often have as an afterthought rather than the first thing we should think about is the experience. Product design should begin and end with the experience. Most PMs work with UX design teams who cover the experience aspect. And my call to action here is not for you to become a UX designer, but it's more to have a sound understanding of the fundamentals of UI and UX design that can be leveraged to give inputs to your designers and provide a strong bridge between the functionality and the experience. A book that I read recently that I found very useful was called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, which I would highly recommend for all you PMs out there. The next is what I like to call the day one experience. If there was one thing that you want to get right in a product, and only one thing, then make sure it's your customer's day one experience of using it. Prioritize features and capabilities that help reduce friction in your user's day one experience. Have you ever wondered why almost all products and services have options during that initial setup along the lines of setup step foo later or skip for now? It's because they don't want to make your setup difficult and they want to make it as easy as possible. Now, they can start to see the core value at that point. Your users can add all of the bells and whistles later on. Noticing trends and patterns. The one thing I believe every product leader and senior executive does well is observing trends and patterns across different areas of their business, product, or even customer, and coming up with solutions that can be reused or adapted from ones that have worked well in the past in their own experience. When you have enough experience in a product area or a team, you start to notice these patterns. When you keep an eye out on what competitors are doing or what sister teams are doing and what customers are struggling with, you have the tools to come up with efficient solutions to scenarios and requirements. This is the last aspect of technology. This is something that spans across all three aspects in many ways, but it's taking risk. It's great when you have data to back your decisions, but a lot of the times in the life of a PM, you're faced with situations where you don't have the required data points to decide. So sometimes you make bold bets, you take calculated risks, and you stand by them. Sometimes it pays off heavily and you get rewarded, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And in that case, you take full responsibility for your decision and you learn from those failures. It does nothing but make you a better PM. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. I hope this was useful and I hope it sets you up to build greater products for your customers. Thank you and bye for now.